Good morning, everyone. We are back on the record this morning. We're in the presence of the jury. The defendant, Mr. Bahena, is present along with the attorneys of record. Ma'am, I just want to remind you, you are still under oath. And with that, then, Ms. Fries, you may continue with your cross-examination of this witness.
Ma'am, in preparing for this trial, what did you review?
The transcripts.
All right. Have you also reviewed the videotape of the interview?
The car interview, yes.
And there's also a videotape of the interrogation, is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Have you reviewed that?
I did not this time.
All right. Have you reviewed that before?
Yes.
Did you review that in preparation for other hearings?
Yes.
It's a long interview, is that right?
Yes.
Explain to me the video system from your understanding at the Poweshiek County Courthouse, or excuse me, the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office.
What exactly would you like me to explain? I mean, I knew the interview was being recorded, but I'm not sure how the system works itself.
Well, there's a room that you and my client were in, is that right?
Yes.
And there was clearly shown a video recording device, is that correct?
I did not pay attention to the video recording device.
But there was a video recording device in the room, is that right?
I am guessing that because I was told that the interview was being recorded, but I wasn't able to locate the video recording device in the room.
And when you left the video room, where did you go to speak with other officers and agents?
It was another room inside the Poweshiek Sheriff's Office.
Was there a way to view the interview room with you and my client?
No.
They weren't able to watch the video of the interview that you conducted?
I am not sure if they were able to see it. When I took my breaks and went out to talk to them, I did not see any video.
All right. In any event, you've watched the videotape, is that right?
Afterwards, yes.
And in fact, you had some, I guess, well, let me back up. When you watched it, did you compare the translations with the transcripts?
I tried to.
It's a difficult process, correct?
It is.
I have some difficulty as I don't speak Spanish.
Yes.
I would assume that even though you speak Spanish and you speak English, that it's still difficult to follow along.
Yes.
But from what you remember from the interview itself, do you believe that the videotape is a fair and accurate depiction of your interview process with my client?
Yes.
And even when you left the room and came back, do you think it was a fair and accurate depiction of what was going on?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, and I'm going to back up, it's divided up into 7 different parts. Is that correct?
I'm not sure how many parts.
There's several different parts that it's divided up into. Is that correct?
I know that it was divided into parts because, again, I review it afterwards, but I was not counting the parts.
All right. And you believe that that's a fair and accurate depiction of what happened that night. Is that right?
That is right.
Your Honor, at this time, I would move to publish Part 3, the third interview. It is time-stamped for the prosecutors, reference 20-27-35. And I intend, because it's over an 11-hour interview, I intend to only publish a portion of this interview. That's from 27:26 to 57:07. I intend to play this on fast forward as it shows a portion where we believe my client is sleeping.
All right, Mr. Brown, let me hear from the state.
Judge, my understanding from discussions with Ms. Fries is that this portion of the interview contains no discussion, there's nobody speaking. It shows the defendant only. Assuming that that's the case, I don't know that it's necessary to play 30 minutes or whatever it is. I know she's going to play it on fast forward. we would agree that he appears to be sleeping in the interview, or I'm sorry, in the room. But if that's what it is, we don't really have any objection to it, but I just want to confirm that.
Ms. Freeze, is Mr. Brown's understanding correct?
There is a portion where Ms. Romero is in the room for a very short time, and then she leaves the room.
With that, then, permission granted to publish. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. And just for the record, I'm having a little trouble getting to the exact point, so I'm starting at 27:23. And for the record, I'm playing at 3 times the normal amount of time. Thank you. Sorry. record, I'm stopping at 5706.
Record will so reflect.
Now, ma'am, we just played about a half an hour of a video, is that right?
Yes,
It was played a little bit quicker as it was played in fast forward, is that right?
yes,
Now, when you came back into the room, you saw that Mr. Bahena was sleeping, isn't that right?
I was carrying the food, so I was looking down and I placed the plate. So when I turned up, I saw him the way that he looks in the video, up and sitting forward a little bit.
So you're telling this jury that you did not see him sleeping?
Again, I do not recall seeing him with his head down. I was carrying the food. I was making sure the sandwich was not falling off the plate. I put the plate down with the drink, and then when I looked up, when I noticed Mr. Rivera, he was looking up the way that it is in the video.
Well, there's a transcript of what you two talked about, isn't that right?
That is correct, yes.
And that transcript would be a fair and accurate depiction of what you said to Mr. Bahena, isn't that right?
Again, yes.
Taking into different, I guess, different ways that Spanish people speak, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there any other way that one would say, you fell asleep?
What do you mean by that? In
Is there
another-
any other way that one would say you fell asleep in Spanish?
Yeah.
All right, well, what I'm going to do, ma'am, is may I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Go ahead and take a chance to review this. I've underlined the portions, and let me know when you're done, and I'll take it back from you.
Okay.
Thank you. Ma'am, isn't it true that as you walked inside the room, you said you fell asleep?
Yes.
You also said I was able to get you something. Is that right?
Yes.
And specifically, that was because you two were talking about food and him being hungry. Isn't that correct?
I do not recall that.
Okay. And you acknowledged to them that it wasn't very big. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, the time on this video, the transcript is 20:27:35. So that's military time. Is that correct?
Yes.
What time would that be in Central Standard Time?
8:27?
Now, the interview that we watched was from 27 minutes approximately to 57 minutes. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So if my memory serves me correct, or if my math serves me correct, I think that would be about 9 o'clock at night, correct?
Correct.
Now, my client, you already talked about, he worked a full day at work. Is that right?
Yes.
He told you that he worked from 5 a.m. until the law enforcement officers came and spoke with him. Is that right?
That is correct.
Do you know of any meals that he was fed between arriving at the law enforcement center and you giving him that sandwich?
No.
Did you ask him when he last ate?
No.
It would be fair to say that the last time he probably had a break, either from being at work or being interviewed, would be at lunchtime. Isn't that right?
It will be fair to say that.
All right. Now, so it was certainly past his dinner time at 9 o'clock.
Yes.
It probably was about the time that this man would be going to sleep. Isn't that correct?
Objections calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Now, ma'am, the next thing that you do, and I'm going to take a second to look in the video, but you give him some time so that he can eat his sandwich. Is that right?
Approximately 23, 25 minutes, yes.
You also give him some time so that he can drink his soda. Is that right?
That is correct.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this point in time, I would move to play 5939 to 122:00 on the video. And I do intend to play that at real time and also not in fast forward. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, any concerns?
We have this same concern that we had before. Also, is this an exhibit? Is there a letter attached to this?
Did I not give you a letter?
I don't recall one.
I don't have one.
Defendant's Exhibit D.
And just for the record, are both videos Exhibit D?
Yes, and I'll make record of when I'm playing them.
Okay.
Permission granted to publish this portion of D.
I'd also move to admit. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
No objection.
Defendant's Exhibit D is admitted at this time.
Can you make sure it's turned up all the way?
Can we pause it and approach, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Freeze, go ahead and reboot, if you will. Start again, or go from this point forward.
It's not loud at all. There's got to be some sort of a,
On our side, we don't have anything to do with it. It comes from your laptop volume.
it's at 100% right now. I'm stopping at 12209. Now, ma'am, you can see during this period that my client is trying to use his phone. Is that right?
Yes,
It doesn't appear that he's able to talk with anyone on the phone, correct?
correct.
He doesn't appear to have his phone up to his ear talking to anybody.
No,
Did you ever talk to him to make sure that he was able to reach anyone?
no,
At about the same time, his family arrives at the sheriff's office. Isn't that correct?
I do not recall the exact time again.
Okay, what time approximately do you recall them getting there?
I do not remember, sorry.
So if a family member were to testify, hey, I remember getting here at this time, their recollection would be better than yours. Is that what you're saying?
Probably,
But in any event, when they arrived, Christian was in the same building, correct?
yes,
In fact, the way the Poweshiek County Sheriff's Office is set up is that there is a waiting room / lobby. Is that correct?
again, I'm not familiar with the setup of the sheriff's office. The family members were out in the lobby.
All right, and the place where my client was being held was not far inside of the hallway. Is that correct?
Right,
It's all on one floor, correct?
yes,
Not a huge building.
again, not sure how big it was.
So it wouldn't have been difficult to make arrangements to allow them to meet with Christian. Is that correct?
Again, that was not my decision, and I was not aware of it.
All right, you didn't ask the permission to allow the family members to speak with my client.
I was advised that the family member was waiting outside, and actually, they were not even inside the lobby because it was after hours, so they were waiting out in the waiting area, which I went out and greet them.
And you told them to go home.
I remember telling them that I was not sure at the times that we were going to go ahead and be there, that if they wanted to go rest, that was just a suggestion that I was making.
Do you recall, and it was right around this time, that you had a conversation with my client where he asked if he was going to sleep there?
I do not recall that.
If I showed you a transcript, would you be able to recall?
Yep.
May I approach?
You may.
And ma'am, just to orient you, I know this is a long transcript. Before we were looking at page 21 when I refresh your recollection. So here, I'm just changing to 22. Go ahead and read that and let me know when you've had a chance to.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Isn't it true that my client asked you, I'm going to sleep here, ? So I could start making myself comfortable in here?
Yes.
And you tell him, no, for right now, just eat, okay?
Yes. Again, after that, there was a chuckle with both of us. I was understanding if he was asking me if he could get comfortable. I said, no, don't get too comfortable. I'm gonna be right back.
Well, you acknowledge that my client indicated that he was very tired.
No. As you can see at the beginning of the videos, the client, Mr. Rivera was very active with me when I had contact with him at all time. I do not recall, and I do not remember at any time Mr. Rivera leaning backwards in the chair when I was talking to him all the time. As it was seen in the video, he was leaning forward. He was engaged in my conversation. He even was leaning towards the table towards me. That is the understanding. So yes, he was tired. Everybody was tired, but I was not able to see that he was really, really tired.
Well, you had acknowledged to me, ma'am, and the first time I approached you with the transcript on page 1, or excuse me, page 21, you told him as you walked in, you said you fell asleep, correct?
Yes, that was the question that I made.
And when we watched the video, Mr. Bahena was asleep.
He could have been asleep. He could have been with his eyes closed. I wasn't in the room.
Well, he appeared to be sleeping on the video, isn't that right?
He, to me, appeared to be resting, leaning against the chair to the back of the room, yes.
And then just a bit later, he asked you, and you're telling us that it's a joke if he was going to sleep there. Is that
I'm
right?
not saying that it was a joke. I'm telling you that we were both chuckling. We were both laughing about it. That is what I'm telling you.
Now, at a later time, you and another male came in and you questioned my client. Isn't that right?
I will have to look at the transcripts again.
All right, thank you. What I'm going to do is, if I bring up the video, it'll just show it to her, right? I want to refresh her recollection. Thank you. Ma'am, I just showed you a video, and that's at about 1:27:40.
Let me stop you. She was not able to see it.
Oh, okay.
Now we're good. In terms of showing it her again.
Were you able to see the video at that time?
Yes.
And does that refresh your recollection of what happened next during this 11-hour interview?
Yes.
It appears that you and another male are walking into the room. Is that right?
That is Sergeant Jeff Fink, yes.
And Jeff Fink, is he your supervisor?
He was my sergeant at the time that I was working with Iowa City Police Department.
Jeff Fink is also fluent in Spanish. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not sure if he is fluent. I had a few conversations with him in Spanish. I believe that at one point he told me that he taught Spanish, but cannot say that he was fluent.
Do you remember Sergeant Fink asking Christian how he was doing?
Yes, Sergeant Fink was doing part of the interview too.
And do you remember at this time my client replying that he was sleepy?
Yes.
Thank you. And it seemed that my client understood that there was another person that was coming in to interrogate him. Is that correct?
No, I'm not that I remember.
Well,
That's not what I understood from him.
at this point in time, you were interrogating my client. Isn't that correct?
I was conducting the interview.
All right. And Officer Fink, he was also interrogating my client. Isn't that correct?
We were both conducting the interview because that's how we started. As you are able to see in the transcripts and video, they were sometimes that I was just by myself in there with Mr. Rivera.
You have specialized training and experience in interviewing. Isn't that correct?
16 hours of training. Not sure if you call it specialized, but 16 hours of training, yes.
You also went to the police academy. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Describe that program.
It is 19 weeks of training, just with police, law enforcement academy in general. So it goes between class sections, physical, a lot of physical, more than class sections.
At that time, you were taught the difference between an interview and an interrogation, isn't that right?
At one point, yes.
An interview is when you talk with a witness, correct?
Yes.
An interrogation is when you confront a suspect, isn't that correct?
Yes.
This was an interrogation.
At that time, I did not know that Mr. Rivera was a suspect.
Well, you were confronting him that he was a liar at that time, isn't that right?
I do not recall calling Mr. Rivera a liar at any time. I was showing pictures to Mr. Rivera. I was showing him pictures of the vehicle, which he said first at the beginning of the interview he denied, and being aware of Mollie's disappearance, and then later he told me that that was his vehicle in the area where she was last spotted. That is how we started the conversation.
Well, right at this same moment that we're talking about, do you recall Officer Fink indicating that my client was not telling the truth?
I do not recall that.
Do you recall Officer Fink saying the evidence doesn't lie?
Again, do not recall that. I have to look at the transcript.
Do you recall Officer Fink confronting my client saying, Christian, you are not telling us the truth?
Again, the Sergeant Fink, I do not recall what he was saying. As you can see in the video, I was focusing on another item that I had in my hand.
May I approach?
You may.
Just right down here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Now, isn't it true that Officer Fink said, but the evidence doesn't lie?
Yes,
He also said, as we know, Christian, you are not telling us the truth.
yes,
And that was an interrogation technique that was used repeatedly with my client over the course of this 11 hours. Isn't that right?
again, interrogation, I will call it interview.
You told him that you found hair in his vehicle. Isn't that right?
Yes,
You also told him that you had his cell phone records. Is that right?
yes.
And you didn't have his cell phone records yet. Isn't that
And
correct?
that was information that was being provided
So you
from
were
other
told.
agents.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Yeah, one at a time.
So you were told that you had cell phone records indicating that he was being there, or that he was in the area. Isn't that correct?
Yes,
And you agree that you were interviewing a person on a homicide case, correct?
I was not aware that it was a homicide case at the moment.
You weren't aware that there was a missing girl that could be dead.
I was aware that there was a missing girl. I didn't know if she was dead.
You were aware that her name was Mollie Tibbetts. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
You were aware that she had been missing for over a month.
That is correct.
There were several times in the interview where you questioned my client saying, where's the body, correct?
I do not recall that.
You speculated that she was dead several different times.
I do not recall that.
Why would you tell my client that he's not telling the truth?
Again, at the beginning of the interview, he was stating that he was not aware of knowing her until we show him the pictures of the black Malibu that he admitted that it was his.
All right, ma'am, I'm going to direct your attention. I think that you can see it on the screen, perhaps not. Do you see anything on your screen, Ms. Morera?
No.
It's up now.
All right, thank you. So now I've opened up the next video, which is at 22:09:04. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't see the time here.
If you look up on the top left side, you can see it.
Yes, now I can.
And the interview shows you and Officer Fink continually questioning my client. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you agree with me that that's a fair and accurate depiction of the interview. Is that right?
no, I do not agree with you.
Okay.
I mean, that is not the way, again, I conducted the majority of the interview ourselves, so we were not even at the right place. I mean, we were switching places.
And so are you claiming that the videotape of the interview is not accurate?
No, I'm not claiming that. I'm just claiming that your question, you stated that this is the way that it went. No, because there were different parts of the interview.
But as far as, and I've got up 22:09:04, and that corresponds with what time, Ms. Romero?
10:09?
And you would agree that this is a fair and accurate depiction of the beginning of the interview at 10:09 at night?
Yes.
And ma'am, just to kind of acquaint you to where we're at, since the interview is brought up in front of you, there's a place where Mr. Rivera asked to use the bathroom about that time. Is that right?
Yes.
And it's clear that it's clear that there's that time on the interview because he leaves the room and goes to the bathroom. Is that correct?
Yes, if I do recall correctly, I did ask him another times if he wanted to use the bathroom or something.
Now, during this 11-hour interview, there was only one time that my client left this space. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was at the time that he said, hey, can I use the restroom? Is that correct?
That is correct.
So other than the time where he's leaving, he is in that interview room alone or being interviewed the entire time. Is that correct?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, I would offer, I'm at 48:24, and I plan to play to 104:12, and I plan to play on a fast forward. I would offer that into evidence and move to publish. Thank you.
Again, I'm going to need help here. Is this D or is it not D?
This is Defendant's Exhibit D, and for the record, it's broken up into 7 different parts corresponding with the interview.
Well, my confusion is, have we already admitted this into evidence or not?
Yes.
Okay, then we don't need to re-offer it. So the question is, permission to publish, correct?
I guess what and not to quibble, but I am only offering I think that there's an 11+ hour interview here, Your Honor, and I am not offering the entire video to go back to the jury. So I think that the interview is as to Defendant's Exhibit D, but the only portions that should be played for the jury are the specific time periods, which is why I'm making record on that.
Mr. Brown?
I'm confused. So the exhibit that, can we make a record on this outside the presence of the jury, please? Or do you want me to make it now? My explanation would be that Exhibit D that was offered, I was unaware there were 7 parts to it. I'm not sure that was mentioned before. We did not object, I think, to Exhibit D. I'm not clear on what Exhibit D completely is in its 7 parts, so I'm not sure where we're at here.
The interview that was produced by the state.
I understand that, and I'm not disputing that the video is portions of the police interaction with the defendant. What I'm confused by is what portions of the interview are part of Exhibit D that has already been admitted into evidence. If there are 7 parts of it, I thought there were 2, I guess, whenever I didn't object to it before. I'm not saying that we have an objection to all of it, I just don't know what it is.
All right, here's what we're going to do. Let's take a 10-minute recess. Let me clear the hall. Members of the jury, I want to remind you of your admonition. Leave your notebooks where they are. And then here's what I'm going to say regarding the exhibit. Again, what I want to say is that D has been admitted. I don't ever remember there being a reference to it being in 7 parts. Now, with that said, I think that the state is going to understand and know what those 7 parts are. I don't think there's going to be any surprises in that. But while we take the break, I want to make sure the state and the defense gets on the same page and make sure there's no problems with D, even though it's already been admitted. So I would ask you to work on that during our 10-minute recess. And with that, then, you are free to go, that is, members of the jury. Ms. Romero, you may step down.